Hello and welcome to Ukraine Today. I'm joined today in our newsroom by Canadian Member of Parliament, Borys Wrzesnewskyj. Mr. Wrzesnewskyj, many thanks for joining us. How did I do on the name there?
You know, I can tell you've been here for a while because those Slavic tongue twisters, you did very well. I'm impressed.
Okay. Well, that's a good start. That's a good start. Just to put our conversation today in context, you're here with a Canadian delegation, including the Foreign Minister. I take this as a sign of support for Ukraine in the face of Russian interference here.
Absolutely. Ukraine holds a special place in Canadian minds and hearts. We have a special relationship, and when you look at foreign policy documents, that special is often in quotation marks. It's an actual policy. As the minister made clear today, we have a new government, but our steadfast support of Ukraine during this time of Russian military aggression and annexation of Ukrainian territory, it's one of our major foreign policy objectives to make clear that we will stand shoulder to shoulder with the people of Ukraine. And especially in this past week, it was important to reiterate that because Mr. Lavrov, in his marquee annual press conference in the Kremlin.
Is it the Russian foreign minister?
Yes, yes. He made a point of, once again, spreading Kremlin propaganda and trying to create confusion in the West and talking about some sort of reset of politics with Canada.
I did want to ask you about that because he sort of, his comments sort of gave us to believe that the new Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, perhaps we could see some kind of reset here between Canadian-Russian relations, some kind of normalization. The way Lavrov sort of spun it out was that Russia is simply just waiting for the Canadians to sort of see the error of their ways and live up to their responsibilities as members of the international community and put economic interests first, for example.
Well, the Kremlin would hope and would want, but clearly it's not the case. And Mr. Lavrov isn't the most trusted of foreign ministers around the world. He's been caught not only in clear misstatements, but he uses this sort of Kremlin propaganda as a tool to confuse the Western public. But we made clear in the House of Commons in a question and answer, a question that I put to the minister and an answer from the minister, our policies have not changed. And today the minister once again reiterated that in meetings with his counterpart, he'll make it absolutely clear that this military invasion and annexation of Crimea is not acceptable. We do not accept it. This continuation of military aggression in the Donbas region, we will speak firmly with our Russian counterparts to make them aware that our policies will not change until Russian forces and military equipment is removed from that region. But there was something also quite important that happened in the Canadian Parliament. We will not accept, in Canada, we're a multicultural society. It's one of our greatest strengths, our human resources. We have people from every corner of the planet that make up our multicultural Canadian mosaic, and we will not accept a foreign minister of a foreign country to denigrate. And you have to understand, this is coming from the Kremlin, so there's an implied threat there as well. One of our cultural communities, calling the Ukrainian-Canadian, calling it a rabid Ukrainian-Canadian diaspora,
yes,
is absolutely unacceptable. And you don't start asking for resets by denigrating the people of the country you're talking about. So Mr. Lavrov clearly made a mistake in this attempt with our new Canadian government to try to confuse the public as to what our positions are. They haven't changed. One thing we do say is we will engage. We will diplomatically engage so that we can make clear to the Kremlin, to Mr. Putin, to Mr. Lavrov, we will never accept the aggression, the breaking of every international agreement since World War II on the sanctity of borders. We will not accept. And until this Russian aggression ends, our relations, the sanctions, will not be removed.
So when Mr. Lavrov says that at the G20 last year, Premier Justin Trudeau had a meeting with Putin, both sides expressed readiness, interest, and the wish to normalize ties, where's this coming from?
Mr. Lavrov. It's, as I said, the Kremlin
There's nothing in it.
No, we wish to engage. We wish to talk so that we can make clear our positions.
But what Lavrov...
And the minister was quite clear on this as well. The Americans are talking with the Kremlin and telling them, the Europeans are, we will make our positions clear to the Kremlin.
So you're ready to do business, but there's got to be some improvement in the situation in East Ukraine.
Oh, it's not some improvement. It's not some improvement. We absolutely, categorically do not accept the military invasion and annexation on the false pretext of ethnic grievances of Crimea. We do not accept, and this fallacy that this is some sort of internal civil war in Ukraine. Look, it's well documented and no one's being fooled. Today it was made clear, until Russians remove their special forces, until they remove arms out of Ukraine, until the Ukraine's borders are once again secured, we're not changing our policies.
Do you not think, though, because there are calls, some already saying this year is going to be more difficult for the international community to stay unified in the face of Russia's aggression, because there are certain voices pushing for a resumption of ties and a return to business as usual. Is it not going to follow a similar path in Canada, where eventually the economic arguments for resuming trade with Russia will outweigh the principles at the moment, which are keeping sanctions in place? Because after all, let's be honest, Ukraine on the economic world map is not a huge country. Russia is much bigger. Trade between Canada and Russia could potentially enrich the Canadian population, the Canadian electorate. The Liberals are going to want to stay in power, and if they can put money in the ordinary Canadian's pocket, they might do that, mightn't they? And Ukraine may, in that sense, get sacrificed. Do you not see things going that way?
Canadians care about principles. What is the value of a Ukrainian life? 8,000, 9,000 Ukrainians have died. Put an economic value to that. What is the value of, I referenced it earlier, Mr. Putin, through his military aggression and invasion of Ukraine, he's broken all international agreements on the sanctity of borders that we've had since World War II. We haven't seen European borders violated in this manner since the 1930s. What is the precedent? We had an imperfect, but we had an international set of agreements, or an international rule of law, one could say, about the sanctity of borders. What is the cost of living in a world where any small country that's next to a larger country can't be secure within its borders? And one of nuclear non-proliferation's greatest achievements, it was seen as a crowning achievement, the third largest nuclear power, global nuclear power, gave up her nuclear arms, Ukraine. It moved the doomsday clock back. At that point in time, people who were engaged in nuclear non-proliferation were rejoicing. Champagne corks were popping. And you had the nuclear powers sign off in Budapest, US, UK, and Russia, that Ukraine's borders would be sanctified. And Ukraine, on that premise, gave up that nuclear arsenal. And there was a side agreement signed off by France and China, all the nuclear powers. How do we go about negotiating nuclear non-proliferation when you've set this precedent? In fact, the world that Mr. Putin is creating, what this precedent says is, well, if I'm a small country, the only way we can protect ourselves is, should we consider going nuclear? This cannot be allowed. So the economic arguments, well, look at the business that we can do with Russia. What is the cost of the human lives? What is the cost geopolitically to allowing this transformation of a world order, a peaceful world order we were building by allowing the Kremlin, allowing Mr. Putin to get away with this?
Mr. Wrzesnewskyj, I'm afraid that is where we will have to leave it. We are out of time. But I'd like to thank you very, very much for coming here to speak with us here on Ukraine Today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for watching us. We've been joined by Canadian MP Borys Wrzesnewskyj here in the Ukraine Today newsroom. Join us again next time.